and welcome. My name is Becky. I own iHeart Art Studios, and today we are going to be painting the butterfly blooms, the cone flower with the butterfly. And you are welcome to adjust this painting however you want to. But if you did get a kit from me, you will have certain supplies that came with the kit. And welcome to those of you who are here joining us live, and welcome to those of you who are watching the recording. I get nervous all of a sudden when I realize it's recording because I can't edit any of this. But with the recording, you are welcome to pause it, fast forward, rewind, because I will be posting it to a YouTube link that, well, if you're watching it, you already know that, but for the live people, so it will get posted. Zoom will send me a link tonight after we're done recording, and then I will upload that to YouTube. So then you can basically watch it on your TV or on your phone or wherever, and you can watch it multiple times. So, but if you did get a kit from me, I'm just going to go over the things that would be in the kit. Or if you didn't get a kit and you are just providing your own supplies, then you'll have a feel for what supplies you'll need for this. So I just included just a sheet like this with just our class date and the supplies that would be included, or the supplies that you'll need. First of all, you should have, this was in the kit. This is just my sketch. However, on the back side, I did rub charcoal on it, which can make your fingers really dirty if you touch it. So you probably don't want to touch it too much. This is the old school way of doing a chalk transfer. For those of you who didn't get a kit, but you still ordered it, you would have been emailed a PDF of this and this. But what you can do is when you take this, if you draw over this with a Sharpie, it will bleed through the back. And then you're going to take a pencil, just like a regular pencil like this. And this is how I suggest doing it. Let me grab a surface here. So here we've got this and your surface, and you're going to take your pencil and you're just going to lay it on its side. And you're just going to rub that on there with a good healthy amount of graphite that's in the pencil. That is basically what is on the back of this. It's just graphite or charcoal. And so you will get the same results just by covering your design with just pencil like that. So the things that you will need then would be a canvas, like right here. We're going to be doing it on an 8x10 canvas. And as I start painting, I will move you closer so you don't have to like strain to see what I'm doing here. You should also have, well, the things in the kit, you should have a paper towel. And it's kind of funny because I go through all of this when I have a class in the studio too, because I want to make sure everyone has the supplies that they should need when they get started. The paint colors that we will be using, black and white acrylic paint. And then I've got some yellow and orange and red. I'm not saying them in the right order here. Green and brown. And if you have any other colors at home, you're welcome to use them. These are just what I included with the kit. We also use a sponge. If you don't have a sponge, you can use like an old sock that lost its pair. You can also use like a kitchen sponge. You just don't want it to have like a rough edge to it. I cut up foam bed, like those egg crates basically, and use those. So something that is foamy and squishy and will hold paint. Then you should, I use Popsicle Sticks, and these are basically just to pull the paint out of the container. Then we use a little bit of chalk, just plain white chalk. And this is when we transfer our design. If there's parts that we have a hard time seeing, we can always do it with the chalk, or we'll draw with chalk on there if you wanted to add something, just like to include it just in case you needed it. And you could use a paper plate. I include a piece of palette paper. So one side is going to be shiny, and that's the side that you're going to want to put your paint on. So think of this like your paint palette where we'll put our paint on here. So the shiny side is the side we'll put our paint on. And then I use Q-tips. We may or may not need it. I always like to just throw one in there just in case. And then the template. We'll also need a cup of water. This was not included in the kit. And then you will also, oh, I forgot to mention brushes. So we're gonna be using just like a small flat brush and a small round brush. I don't know how big that is to you if I'm too close, but these are just the brushes that I'm gonna use. You all should have brushes that are pretty similar to this if you got the kit. So feel free to use other brushes that you have also. And then, oh, we will also, oh, excuse me, I feel a sneeze coming on. So if I like quickly move away, that's why. But we'll also be using a pen, like a ballpoint pen to do the transferring of the design onto the canvas. So that is just something that we'll use. You could use a pencil. I like to use a pen, but either way works fine. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. And so the first thing that we're gonna do, I feel like, am I missing something? I don't think I'm missing anything. I think we're all good. So we are going to paint our background color. So for the background, what I did is I used the green color. So I'm just gonna pull a little bit out. We actually only use a little bit of green at the very end for the stem, and then we throw some green in here. Otherwise, the green that you have is mostly what we'll use for our background color. So I'm just gonna pull out like a glob of this onto my palette paper, just because I'll be grabbing it with the sponge, and it's just gonna be easier to grab it if it's out on the paper. Just put a little bit on my palette paper. And then I'm going to flip my popsicle stick over, and we are going to put a little bit of white, not much, just a little blob on there. We're going to blend the colors, but we're not doing it yet. And then I'm going to grab a little bit of yellow and put that on my palette paper. This is probably more than what I need, but this is what I'm going to be using. A little green, white, and yellow. And then for my stick, a lot of times I'll just like tear an end off of my paper towel and just use it to kind of wipe it. Because once it dries, you can reuse it. Or you can use a different process. That's just what I do. Okay, so I'm gonna get us a little closer here. I do recommend putting your lids back on if you are using out of the cups, just because it will keep your paint a little bit fresher. And I think that snap is pretty satisfying. I don't know about you, but it has a very nice snappy sound when you snap those lids. Move you in a little bit. Let me know at all while this is going on if you are having a hard time seeing what I'm doing. I feel like sometimes it's kind of hard. I'm just gonna see if my view is any different here. Oops. Oh no, I don't know what I'm doing. Okay. I think I'm there. Okay, so I am going to take my sponge, and with these sponges, usually there's a side that has some like texture on it. I usually hold that side, so I fold it over, and then I'll have this little flat edge right here that I use. And I'm going to be doing this where I'm going to kind of press and twist lightly, but with a little pressure, because we don't want the paint to be too thick, but we want it, because we want it to dry quickly, but we want it to cover the canvas. So I'm gonna just take this and do a little dip into my green. And up here, I'm just gonna start by just kind of spreading out that green. And you want to cover the edges of the canvas as you go. Now I feel like this is like what happens is you can see a lot of the canvas through this. It's kind of a harsh green right on the canvas. So with my same sponge, I'm going to do one dip into the white, put a little white on there, and I'm going to go right over this. We can come back and darken it up a little bit later, but what's going to happen is it's going to cover better. Kind of, in my opinion, I feel like it looks a little bit smoother when you put a little bit of white with it. And then I'm gonna grab some more green and just keep filling this up. I kind of do the edges, and then you can do this where you're not lifting it off and you're just kind of going in a round circular pattern. If it looks really harsh to you, you can grab a little bit more white. You don't want it to get too light though. Just putting a little bit to make it look smooth. And then as we get about halfway, kind of like where I'm at right now, I'm going to start, instead of using the white, I'm going to start putting some yellow. So I'm going to do green and yellow, which is going to give us a little bit different color. So it's a little bit more yellow down here and it's more green up here, if that makes any sense. So I'm still going to start with my green. And I'm going to just move this because the easel's kind of in the way. I'm going to grab a tap of the yellow and just mix that in as I go. And you can see it makes kind of a weird green yellow color. It's just giving some different color vibes. And you want to kind of mix it so it blends with the top a little bit. So if you got to go back up, you can. I'm just going to turn mine upside down. If you want it to be like much more yellow, you can add just more yellow instead of more green. I'm going to give you lots of choices here because you can even do a little tap in the white and add that to it to make it even a lighter shade. I just want you to have all the options. And you really want to smooth it out so it's not thick. So if you've got thick areas, just go over it with your sponge. So I've got my whole thing kind of covered. Now, when we spread it out really thin, it dries really fast. And so up here, I actually have little spots that are already dry. So if I did want to make this part up here a little bit darker, I can just grab a little bit more green. But this time I'm just going to tap it. So it's just like an actual coming off the canvas, tapping, going over the same spots to make sure it's not, you don't want thick paint on there. So you want to tap all that paint to make sure it's not too thick. As we're going in this live, please don't feel uncomfortable that it is being recorded, but ask questions, because if you do have a question, I guarantee you someone else is going to have the same question. And sometimes I just forget to say something. So please don't be shy about asking. There is also a comments section where you can type in your question. So if you feel more comfortable with that, feel free to do that. I gotta see if I can see that, because I don't see the comments. Oh my gosh, I'm so not super familiar with this. If anyone knows how to, maybe someone has to make a comment for it to show up in the comment section. I'm not really sure.
In the chat?
Yeah, I don't see a chat.
At the bottom, it says chat.
Oh, I
You
see.
see it?
Oh, there. Now I have it. Okay, I'm chatting. It says I'm chatting as a guest. Okay. Well, now at least I see the chat. So thank you.
Hmm.
So if anyone would prefer to just be in the chat instead of speaking with your voice, that's fine too.
Is it supposed to look a little spotty?
It is, yes.
Okay.
It should look a little spotty. And so I'm sorry, I got distracted. So if there's parts, because you want it to look pretty uniform. So over here, I'm still really swirly. So I'm gonna just take a little bit more color and I'm gonna do some tapping down here too. And you can do the tapping on all of it. Like you make your background look how you want it to look. But what I noticed tends to happen is it has this, it's almost like, I feel like it almost looks like a little velvet because it's got this texture to it when you do the tapping. And so that's kind of how I see there's thunder out there now too. Sorry, very distracted. But I also have some like white spots out here too that, you know, I added in some white tapping. I have no idea if we're supposed to have bad storms. I know we're under a wind advisory right now, but if any of you local people are watching and there is a notification of a warning where I should run to the basement, let me know. So the flower and the butterfly are going to be covering up most of my background. I just want to make sure that the parts that are going to be around the outside look how I want them to look. And I just want to remind you too that we are all unique in individuals. So your painting won't really look a whole lot like mine, and it won't look like anyone else's just because we're all unique and we all have different handwriting. So the way that we paint, it's going to be different. And I love seeing the pictures when we're all finished. So I will try to take like a group picture if you feel comfortable with that. Otherwise, feel free to send me a picture through either email or Facebook or wherever, Instagram, however you want to contact me. And then what we want to do is we just want to wait for this to dry. So I will wait for most of us to move on. Typically, how I'll do this is I'll ask for a thumbs up if you are, I'll ask in a minute if it's, is everyone's dry? Are we ready to move on? And then you can give me a thumbs up. And I think in the chat, you can do that too, or you can do a little thumbs up. It will show up on your name. But if you wanted to wash your hands while you're waiting, you can, or you can rinse out your sponge, or if you need to go get a snack or a drink, you can do that too. But we will be using our template next. So you'll want to make sure you have like a pen or a pencil to use. And all right, I think we're gonna wait for this to dry. And I'm just gonna go put my sponge in some water and wash my hands. I'll be right back. And if anyone wants to chat while we're waiting, I am all for that, but just know that our conversations are being recorded. I want you to be able to see everything.
Are we done with the sponge?
Yes, we are done with the sponge. One thing is with the template on the back, if you hold it up to the light, you can see where you can kind of see in the video here to make sure that the black is all over the image, because I didn't use, I mean, I drew this digitally, but if it is not covering a certain part, what you can do is just use your finger and you can just rub some of that. You don't want to rub too much of it off, but you can kind of rub outside the lines and it will bring that there. It will get your finger really dirty also, but just so you're aware of that, I wouldn't rub it too much because you don't want to take too much of that off. I know that mine probably is the first to dry because I do mine pretty light, but if you could just let me know where yours is at the drying process. Yours is dry already? Okay. Anyone else want to let me know if it's dry or not dry? Okay, Kendra, good. Oh, look at that. I see all this. Perfect. I love it, Reagan. Perfect. Thank you, Brenda. All right, so what I'm gonna do, if it's easier for you to tape it down, you could tape it down, but I'm just gonna place this here. For the templates that you got in the kit, I did cut them to the size of the canvas, so you shouldn't have to make any adjustments. But if you did print it on an 8 by 8.5 by 11 or 8 by a regular sheet of paper, just be aware of where your design is in relativity to the canvas. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna click out your pen. So I'm just make sure the ballpoint is out. And then I'm just going to go over the lines. Now you don't have to be perfect on all of these lines because the paint is going to make it a little bit different. But what we're gonna do is just go over all of the lines. I'll also just mention that a lot of some of these details may get covered up while we're painting, but you can still draw them in there because it will be easier for you to kind of paint within the lines a little bit. Sometimes when I start doing a little bit, you want to just move this just to make sure that you can see the image. And I can see mine okay, but if you can't see it, you may have to draw a little harder. Just don't press too hard because I don't want you to like rip into the canvas at all. But this is kind of like carbon paper. And if you want your butterfly design to be any different, you don't have to trace this how it is. You can definitely make your butterfly have different wing pattern if you want. I'm currently in the process of planning my summer garden. So I am very much thinking of my coneflowers that will grow, looking at pictures of my coneflowers from last year and the year before. They're just one of my favorite flowers. So after, I don't know if you can see it, but it does put a pencil mark on there. If your background is really dark, you can use chalk and rub chalk on the back of your template instead of the pencil marks. Chalk is another great way to transfer an image, but your background has to be pretty dark in order for that to work. But if there are certain parts that you can't see, like I have a couple petals that are harder to see, I'm just going to use my chalk to draw those so I don't lose them. And please let me know if you're having any issues. And then you can just let me know when you have it traced with your thumbs up. Thank you. Awesome. Great. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to take the red and white and I'm going to put some of that on my palette paper. We are going to paint our petals before we paint the cone part. We're also going to be, let me think here. Yeah, so we're going to be pulling our red and our white out first. And I'm just going to put a little bit. I don't know how much we're going to need, but and the reason that I wanted to do red and white instead of sending you pink is because this will allow you to vary the color. So you can add more red to your petal to get it darker, or more white to make it lighter, or you can kind of get these varied shades where you have part of it that's a little bit darker and a part that's a little bit lighter. In the actual cone flowers, you can also, you don't have to do this if you don't want to, but I just want to demonstrate is you can actually even pull out a little bit of orange, because orange and pink make some really cool colors for petals also. So I've got my red, white, and my orange out. And you may decide that adding the orange isn't for you, and that's perfectly fine. All right. I'm going to be using, now you can use a round brush if you want to for this. Personally, I have a little bit easier time using the flat brush, but it's up to you. You can completely decide however you want to do it. If you are right-handed, it's probably going to be easier to start on this side and paint the petals going this way. If you're left-handed, it may be easier for you to start on this side and work this way, so you're not getting your hand in the paint as you're going. I like to start by taking my brush and just kind of dipping it in the white. It doesn't have to be like, it's kind of thick on there, not super, you don't want a big glob, but I'm going to start right in the middle of the petal with the white. And I don't want you to worry too much about staying in the lines. I do want you to be cautious on your edges. So I'm going to just kind of, after I wipe some of the thicker stuff off in the middle, I'm going to just put my tip there along the edge and just bring it down the edge of the petal, trying to keep that as smooth and within the line as possible. And really trying, if you go the skinny way like this instead of the wide way, you can get way down into that tip. But if it would be easier for you to use the round brush, you can just take this, go this direction, put the tip down in that end part there, and then pull it up. That might be easier for some of you. So I'm just going to put a little layer of white. And I do every petal individually. So now I'm going to keep my brush with the white paint on it. And I'm going to do a little dip into the red. And while this white is still wet, I'm going to just blend that in. And it makes a very nice shade of pink. So you don't want to worry too much about your edges, especially with that first white layer. I mean, you still want to worry about them, but you don't have to be too picky, because we'll adjust them more so with the red when we're going over it. Now, I also want to point out in this sample, there are white streaks on here. That is done later. So we're not worrying about these white highlights right now. All we're doing is we're just getting this base color. So if you want it to have darker color, sometimes it's fun to put darker color closer to the cone part. You can put in, so here I got some darker red I put in here. Up here, I'm going to just wipe off the excess on my paper towel, not washing it. And you could even grab a little bit more white and use white going down the petal. So that way you have a blended, so it's almost like an ombre. So darker up here and it gets lighter as it goes down, if that makes any sense. Now, if you tried using the flat brush and it didn't work well for you and you want to try using the round brush, perfectly fine. I like to tell people the round brushes, they're kind of like ballerinas when you use them, because when you grab the paint, you want to twirl that tip back and forth in the paint like a ballerina would twirl around. So I'm laying it down. I'm not twirling it standing up like this. I'm laying it down, twirling it back and forth. So that will give me a nice tip on it. And then when you use it, think of a ballerina that likes to dance on its toes. So just the tip is going to touch. You can see that. You just want the tip of it to touch. And then you can even just put the tip out into those tips of the flowers and then pull up. It might be easier to do that. It really kind of varies on, some people prefer a round brush, some people prefer a flat brush. And when we're doing these flower petals, we won't actually, well, the only thing that we'll come back and do later to them is put a tiny little black shadow under some of them. So as we're doing this, well, and the white highlight. So as we're doing this, you want to make the petal, each petal look how you want it to look. So sometimes they might look like they blend together, but we will use the black and the white to fix that. Okay, I'm just gonna see if I can turn you around for a second to show you the wind that we're having outside. I think the building is gonna blow over. I'm gonna take you to the door. This is a little field trip. I don't know if you can see out there. Oh, of course now it's not blowing as hard. But you see the flag out there is really blowing. Sorry, there's lots of reflections in the windows, but it looked like it was just blowing like. I'm just fascinated by the weather. Now I gotta get back to painting. So we are, as I'm doing this, I'm just gonna keep doing every petal. Now, some of these bigger petals might be easier to use a flat brush. So you can go back and forth between, just do whatever feels most comfortable to you. And you can even vary the petals. Like say I wanted to have one considerably lighter, like this one here, it looks really pretty actually right next to kind of a darker petal. You can do that because it will look like the light is reflecting on it. And maybe you want to make the end of that one, like the tip down here, more red instead of more red up near the base. It's kind of fun because you get to create each petal however you want to. And each petal is so unique. Or you can just keep it really light pink if you want to. So just keep working your way through, and please let me know if you have any questions. If you make a mistake, just a little tip, if you make a mistake and you go outside the line, like really bad, like you drop your brush and it falls onto a certain spot, or the paint splattered not anywhere near where it should be, if you take a damp cloth right away and wipe that, it should come off. It may take a little bit of the background off, but you can always go back and touch that up. It's kind of the nice thing about doing this at home, is because you have all that paint where if you need to make adjustments, you can. I think this is going to be our puppy's first thunderstorm. So that's kind of interesting. My son will be home with the puppies tonight. Oh, I was gonna also show you if you wanted to put some orange in there and I forgot. So I'll do that with this one here. So first I got my little white layer. Then I'm gonna grab some of my red to make this pink color. And then I'm just gonna wipe the brush off from the excess paint I have on there. And then I'm gonna grab a bit of orange and I'm just gonna blend that in as it's wet. Now, it may look a little different because it's next to some bright pink ones, but it actually creates a really pretty coral color. So I may want to come back and just throw some orange into the other petals too as I'm going, because I have a lot on my brush. So by putting a little bit in, while it's all still pretty wet, really is a nice addition. And you will definitely have to let me know, like when I finish, because I feel like I'm a fast painter. We're painting a lot of petals kind of independently right now. So I'm not really sure where you guys are at. So you don't have to let me know yet. Oh my gosh, the flagpole looks like it's gonna blow over. I'm so sorry. I don't mean to keep talking about it. It's just, I would turn it around and show you, but it's not gonna still be doing that by the time I do that. Some of these petals are pretty close together. So as you're painting petals, it's okay if you go over another petal and kind of make your own little petal parts. And then when you get to that last petal, the butterfly wing is overhanging it a little bit. That part right there that it's overhanging, we're going to be painting black, which will cover up any parts where that pink will get into that petal or into that wing. So just do your best to go around. So don't worry too much about that if you're struggling to get around that. And another thing too, as I'm doing this here, I a lot of times as I'm painting the petals, if the paint gets really thick on my brush, I just tap it off on my paper towel. So this is what my paper towel looks like. It's just kind of covered in little tapping off of paint. So if it gets too thick on there, just tap off that thick paint so you can grab some fresh paint, because sometimes it does. It just kind of gets loaded up. And then if you try to brush, like I tried my using the round one, I'm gonna be done using it for right now. So I'm just gonna set it in my water so the paint doesn't dry hard on there. And then when you get your petals done, you can give me a thumbs up and don't feel the pressure, because I know everyone paints at a different pace. Look at you go, Reagan. Awesome, Brenda. Awesome. See a thumbs up there. Okay. I can't remember, Amy, did you give me a thumbs up or are you still working?
Still working.
Okay. We will be working on the orange part of the butterfly next. So if you wanted to get out, we'll be actually using yellow and orange and possibly a little bit of white. So if you still have some cleaner white, you can use that. You can pull out a little bit more if you would like. And then you're gonna wanna rinse off your brushes. I'm gonna just kind of swirl them around in my water to rinse them off and then dry them off on my paper towel so they're ready to use the next time. And a little trick for when you're drying off a round brush, you want to twirl it on your paper towel also. That will keep that nice pointy shape for you. And when you are drying off a flat brush, you want it to just pull it, like laying it down, kind of like you're sweeping. That will keep that shape really nice for you also. So we have been at our class now for about an hour. So if anyone does need to use the bathroom, we'll start on our butterfly in just a few minutes. So if you have to use the bathroom or you need to run and change out your water or whatever, you're welcome to do that. I would say, 3 minutes or so, 4 minutes, I don't know. Oh, good. I see your thumbs up, Amy. So now you can have just a couple minute rest before we move on to the next step. Since I just told everyone that they could take a quick little break. All right, well, I hope we're all ready. We're gonna start moving on to our butterfly. So you are welcome to decide which brush you would prefer to use. I am going to switch to my round brush. I think I'm gonna have a little bit better control getting in all those little points with this one. And to do the butterfly, we're gonna try, so all these parts that we did that look like the pencil marks on there, that is gonna get covered up with the black. So you are going to, I'm gonna just start with a little bit of orange. So I'm twirling my brush in the orange. Start in that little point and pull. Now I can still, the orange doesn't cover as well by itself, so I can still see some of that green underneath it. So I want to brighten it up. I'm going to grab a little bit of white. And if you want to keep yours just more orange, that's totally fine. You can do that. But I feel like adding a little hint of the yellow to it, just a little bit, really kind of brightens it up. Even more so than the white. And remember, everything that we're going to be painting around is going to be black. And actually, I feel like I don't know why, it's really hard doesn't want to show. Maybe I'm just going to grab some white first of all. I'm just going to fill this in with some white. So in order to get our orange yellow mix to look really bright, we're just going to do more white instead. So we're going to fill in all these little spots with just use white. Now I have kind of a hint of color on mine because I just was in the orange and the yellow, probably along with you, and that's perfectly fine. But I'm just going to grab white now and just kind of fill in, doing a thin layer, just like a base layer. Doesn't have to be perfect, but you don't want it to be too thick because we want it to dry pretty fast. But that will help that orange. If you put a little white down first, it's going to help that orange and yellow to look really bright white or really bright orange. I missed a spot when I was tracing it, so I'm just going to add it in here. And I am just basically painting each individual, because I don't want to lose, you don't have to have the, like they don't have to be perfectly touching because that black is going to go in there, but you don't want to lose the design. So you want to leave enough of a space that you can see it, but not enough that will make, you'll have to put a really thick black line in there. So my son is in the spring musical and they have practice every night after school until 7 o'clock. So he is probably driving home right now. I keep talking about the weather. I can't help it. And it is really coming down hard right now. I'm surprised he hasn't messaged me. Oh, yes. In Stevens Point, it's finally made its way there. Yeah. The thunder's rolling, there's lightning, the wind is so strong. I kind of enjoy like a good thunderstorm though, spring thunderstorm. So I don't mind it. I just want to make sure that my son's not out in it. Oh, he actually just got home, so I don't have to worry anymore. So I want this to dry a little bit before I put the orange over it. So what I'm gonna do is, because I have pretty much white on my brush, while I'm, waiting for it to dry a little bit more, these petals now are dry. So I'm just gonna take white, and you don't want a whole, like you don't want thick white on there. So after you grab your white, you almost just want to find a little clean spot and just roll it off. So you don't have a thick amount, like it's covered, but it's not thick. If you're worried about it still being too thick, you can even roll a little off on your paper towel, because you don't want it to be like super bright white, but you want it to have just pure white color. And all I'm gonna do is on the tops of the petals, I'm just gonna do this little white line like that. And on every little petal, I'm just gonna put this little white. Now it doesn't have to be like on the line, you can put it inside the line. So like in the petal, it will look like there is light that is shining and reflecting off of your petals. And you barely need any paint on there. If you have too much, that's fine too. It will just be like really bright. You could even put two little stripes of white on a petal if you want to. like these front ones, sometimes I'll do that. It looks weird at first, but it will go back to normal once we're finishing things up. And if you think that you're like, oh, I'm not really sure if I liked that, well, we used white for our petals. Not like I want you to repaint all of them, but you can always take a little bit of that red, whatever color you used, and go over it to just mute that if you do get it a little out of hand. Sometimes they get out of hand and you just can't help it. But it sure is easy to fuss with the petals because I know I can keep going back and forth and just keep adding and adjusting them. So once you've done that, mine look like they're pretty dry. There might be a couple that are a little tacky still, so I'm gonna do those ones last. But then you can see when you add the orange over that white, it's gonna be so much brighter. And then I'll just also take a little bit of yellow. So a little yellow and a little orange and kind of mix them together. I don't mix them ahead of time. I like to mix it right on there because then you get like cool little swipes of different like colors as you're going. So I'll start with just the orange. And then just grab a little yellow on my brush. It's just so pretty together. So I'm just gonna do all those little, I keep calling them petals, but wings. The little wing petals, that's what they are. And if it's easier to just do one color, that's fine too. You don't have to do the two colors. You could always add some yellow in later if you'd like. But now I don't have to add in any white because we got that white to give it a nice base coat, so the color should be brighter. And because there's gonna be black out here at the ends, we don't have to be super perfect about filling in those little wing petals. But I'm still gonna try to keep it relatively Well, and it may not look that bright until we get the black on there and the little white dots. The crazy thing about painting butterflies, in my opinion, is I feel like the butterfly doesn't really, like, I'm not going to say it doesn't not look good, but those white dots, that is what will make a world of difference. The first time I painted a butterfly, I didn't really think it was like that spectacular. And then I put the white dots on it and I had to step away for a second. And then when I turned around and I looked at it, I was shocked because I was like, oh my gosh, that actually looks amazing. And it really is just the way that those white dots it just pulls the whole butterfly together. So don't be hard on yourself if you feel frustrated or like it's too hard, because it will come together. I'm saying that confidently because I believe in you. All right, are you almost finished with your butterfly part? Yes. So I just got a question in the chat. It says that the petals on the flower dried and now you can see the green underneath. Can you fix that? You can fix that. And what that would take is just doing another layer of paint over what you just did. And if the green starts to come through as you're like painting, it means it's not completely dry, but it's something that you can definitely like fuss with if you have downtime while we're doing this live, or if you wanted to do it later, you can. But usually just putting a second layer on there should cover up any green that you see underneath. I hope that answers your question. Great. All right, I think I know I saw one thumbs up. Oh, okay, so there's another thumbs up. 3, okay, perfect. So a couple of you are still working, okay. Awesome, okay. So now what we're gonna do is we are going to do the black that goes around our butterfly. So I'm just gonna rinse off my round brush, dry it off. And now because we are only using black, if you got the kit, then you can just dip right in the kit. You don't have to pull the black out. And I'm just gonna twirl it around kind of on the edge. You don't want to just dip and get a big blob of paint. That's not what you want. So I'm gonna just kind of roll it on the edge. Of course, many of yours has gone through like the shipping process or picking up, so your cups might not look as clean as mine. So if you grab your paint, you might need to put it on your palette paper and just roll it so it's not too thick. And then remember tippy toe, and you're just going to fill in that butterfly body. And as you're going around your little petal piece, your wing petals, you want to stay very much on the brush tippy toes as you're going through like that. Because if you press down too hard, it's going to get really thick. You don't want it to get too thick. You want it to stay pretty thin. And you're just going to kind of fill in all that space going around. I would say like you can grab a little bit more paint if you're just going to go around the outside parts, but you just want to be very cautious to not have too much on your brush when you're going through those little spaces. And I find if you can get into this little spot, it's almost easier to start in here and just pull out. And sometimes the orange parts are going to get smaller, and that's okay. Every butterfly wing is a little bit different. They're all so unique. They sure are pretty too. And I do want to apologize because I know that I make this look really easy. I have painted so many coneflowers and butterflies. Right up on the wall over here, I've got a window painting of a coneflower and a butterfly. And then back over here, I have a porch sign with a coneflower and a butterfly. It is just one of my favorite designs. So I feel like every year I have to do something new with the coneflower and the butterfly. It can be tricky getting around the corners, like the curved parts. So sometimes I'll start in a flat part and I'll just do half the curve, and then I'll come back on the other side and do the other half of the curve. And sometimes if I mess up pretty bad, sometimes I'll just cover up like a whole wing petal. Because I'm like, oh man, I really messed that one up. So I just make it look different or make it look like something new. And if you want to do those antennas, you can. The other thing, the antennas and the little feet, we don't want to do the feet yet. We're going to do those. Well, I guess you could do the feet now if you wanted to. But if you have access to a paint marker at home, you are more than welcome to use that. You just want to make sure it's a small tip, like a tiny tip. And then to do the antennas, sometimes if you dip your brush into the water and then twirl that water in your little pile of black paint, it will make the paint a little flowier, which then it might give you a better little line instead of just dipping in the paint and doing it. But if you feel like you can do it, then you can do it. Some people might want to use a Sharpie, but the finish of the Sharpie is going to look more shiny versus the paint, which will dry matte. So just something to think about. So I did decide to put my little feet on there. And I brought them into the coneflower because when we do this top part here, we're going to cover up a lot of those parts of the feet. And then let me know when you have that part finished, because we are getting close. Got it. I see you, Brenda. Oh, I can't wait to see them. It is probably the hardest thing for me, not being able to like walk around and actually see what you guys are doing. I see you. Awesome. Yay. Okay, awesome. So I am going to rinse my brush off, and then we are going to pull out our brown to start working with our cone is what we're going to do. Now, basically, you are more than welcome to use more brown in different parts, but what I like to do is I'm just going to use brown to kind of put this like base layer on there so we can't see the green through. And then we will be using our orange, red, and yellow colors to do individual little taps on there. So I don't have to pull the brown out. I'm just going to dip my brush into the brown and then start in the middle and just kind of fill this in. You don't necessarily want to do like, you don't have to do every little like bubble out here, because what we'll do for that, not bubble, but like little ridge, because what we're gonna do is we are going to use our round brush to basically tap those in out there. So I'm just kind of getting this base layer. You can, gently put in those little, but I'm not trying to be perfect. So you can see I'm just kind of wisping it in. It doesn't have to be perfect out there, just kind of wildly filling it in. If you want it to be a little bit more of a lighter brown, you can always grab a little bit of white with your brown and mix that in to lighten it up a little bit. But I don't want this to be too thick either, because I want it to dry relatively fast. I'm just going to kind of get a base coat of the brown on there. And I do go over a little bit of the butterfly wing, just a little bit. And I honestly don't really know, like, I feel like when I painted this, this is how I did it with the brown. I didn't try it a different way, so I don't know if the other colors would color fine, but I just felt like this was the safest way. To cover up that green. And it is still kind of rough down here. It doesn't have to be perfectly like aligned down at the base at all. All I'm doing is just like loosely, just ooh, getting a little too loose there, but just kind of filling in, keeping the base of it a little softer. So it's not like a harsh line. And honestly, if you didn't want to put in all those other colors, like here, this looks pretty good as it is, in my opinion. So we don't necessarily have to wait for the brown to be completely dry before we start the next step. But when I do these little taps, it goes on pretty thick. And I kind of rotate through the colors so that way they show up. So on my sample here, I started with kind of this yellow, and then I switched to orange and then red. I probably did some orange in between, but you can't really see the difference. So it's good to kind of mix the colors. So, excuse me, how I'm gonna do this is you can decide if you want to pull it out or if you want to work in your cups or whatever, because we will be kind of mixing some of those colors. But I'm gonna just load up with some yellow for starters, and I'm just gonna tap. It's gonna pull some of that brown a little bit, and that's okay. So I'm just gonna kind of tap. And then I don't really wash my brush in between. I'm gonna grab some orange and I'm gonna overlap that orange so that way you can see the tips of them are gonna show up. When I'm noticing that the color isn't really showing up anymore, that's when I'm gonna just maybe switch to the red color. And I'm gonna throw some red in there. There's not really a rhyme or reason for how I did it. I just tried to vary the colors so that way the tips, like each little blob would show up. So I'm gonna just wipe my brush off when I grab the next round of yellow, and then that next bit of yellow will go over those other colors. Let me try a little bit more yellow here. And you're gonna get some cool mixes of shades because you're going through these different colors. So you can kind of see how it's all those different colors are kind of coming together a little bit. If you wanted to try any different combination, you are more than welcome to do that. And I start at the top, and then as I come down, my direction is going to change a little bit. So instead of being totally straight up and down, I'm going to turn my brush at more of an angle. So that way it's angling outward and it's pulling towards the center. So I'm always pulling towards the center. So as you look at the sample one, they're coming almost sideways from way at the bottom. They're very sideways way. And then they get a little taller as they go through the center. And then they're more sideways on the side. That's going to give you that cone shape to make it look like it's more round. And my yellow isn't usually as bright as it gets closer to the bottom, and that's okay. All right, let me know where you're at. Thanks, Amy. Thank you. Ooh, nice paintings in the background, by the way.
Thank you.
Thank you. Awesome. Look like you just kissed it, Dory. You kissing it because you love it so much?
It's a little wet, especially the cone part. It's real wet. So I was kind of blowing it.
I see, yes. Mine is still very, it's still really wet too, because we put it on so thick, but we're
Okay.
not really gonna do a whole lot over the top of it, so that is why. It's okay, if it's not really thick. We are at the home stretch. So the only thing that we have left to do, well, the only things we have left to do are the green stem and a little bit of green coming out under the cone, and then the white on our butterfly and some of the black outlines, which is totally optional. So we are gonna start though with the green. So whichever brush you feel most comfortable with, I'm gonna use, I think I'm gonna use my round one. Rinse it off because it's all colorful. And I am just gonna dip right in and grab some green. And at the base here, I'm gonna put my stem in. Remember when we did our background, we used that green and yellow mix. So you can use just green if you want it to show up. Now, if you want it to be a tad darker, what you would want to do is if you have any black, you just want a tiny, teeny little bit, because a little bit of black is gonna take over, like, I mean like a tiny little bit. And if you put that black in there, it's gonna just darken the green to a really nice Kelly green color, which is just like a little bit darker. So it's gonna show up a little bit more. The problem with grabbing a little hint of black is sometimes the black can take over and the whole stem will be black. We don't want that. But if it happens, it happens. It's okay. Just let it dry and you can go over it with green again. And then this part, I don't want you to overthink this part too much because we're gonna just put these tiny little petals, little greenery up in between some of the petals here. And all that is just some green on my brush. And I'm just going to basically tap little bits of green in here and fluffing it outward, kind of in between the petals. It doesn't even have to be perfect. Feels really weird at first. And then when you step back a little bit, it looks appropriate. And again, it's optional. You don't necessarily have to do it, but I feel like it also fills some of the space up where just not really sure what's going on there in between some of those leaves. So it hides some of that questionable petal painting stuff that could be happening in there. I am saving the white dots on the butterfly for last because that is the most fun part. So the next part is going to probably be one of the trickiest parts that you'll run into in the whole painting. And that will be doing some of the black shadows on the petals. I did very tiny brush strokes and it can be kind of difficult to do them that small. So if you don't want to do that, you don't have to do that. As long as when you look at your picture, you get the gist of what it is, or if you have a little paint marker or even a little Sharpie. But remember, the finish of a Sharpie is more shiny and it won't be matte, so it might show up a little bit more. But like we did with the white, where we would dip and then we're gonna just really wipe all the excess off. I'm gonna like lay it down and wipe all the excess off. You really don't want any, you don't want any black paint really on there. And the other thing is you can also dip it in your water, wipe off the drips, and then just, we didn't wash it, we just dipped it and then roll it in your paper towel a little bit. The brush will still hold some water, but I don't really have any paint on there, but it will be like kind of like dirty. It's kind of like a dirty brush. So you could do a practice where you're just letting the very tip touch and we're just going to do a tiny little line. That's really all you're going for. It's kind of shiny here. So tiny line. So try and just make sure that you get a little black off of your brush after you've dipped in the paint, wiped it off, dipped in the water, rolled it on your paper towel. There's like, I know I'm totally overcomplicating it, but I just don't want you to get too dark with it. And all I'm gonna do is where some of those where some of the petals kind of overlap. So like right here, there was this main one, and then there's another one under it, but it's kind of hard to tell because they blend together. I'm just gonna put a little line to separate. And grab a little bit more. I'm trying to see here. So basically it's kind of like doing a tiny little outline, but we're not really outlining. We're just putting in some little black shadow lines. It's gonna bring the petals out a little bit more. And it's just using very, very light pressure. I don't even know if you can see what I'm doing in the video, but it just adds just enough to make the petals kind of stand out a little bit more from each other. And you don't have to do all of them. We're just kind of doing parts of them. And while I'm down here, I'm also going to do just one side of my stem, that green stem. I just did one side of that. Again, the nice thing about doing this at home is if you get a line too thick, you can just let it dry and then you have those paint colors that you can use to go over it after it's dried and it will cover them up. All right, how you guys doing? Awesome. Oh, there's like 3 of you there. And then you are going to want to rinse your round brush to do the white spots on there. To do the little dots, they're not exactly just pure dots. One thing that you could do is the back of your brush does make a good dotter if you wanted to just do like little dots. I'll show you that, but I'm actually going to do most of them with the bristle end. But if you just do a little tap in to get a little bit of white on the end, you can then just basically dip and dot like that. It does keep them tight, kind of like, I feel like they're almost too perfect when you do them that way, but it's a preference. But I'm gonna just dip into the white, and then I am just going to dot. I dot the head and the body. I kind of move my brush going different directions, so they all don't look exactly the same. You can even make some of them a little bit bigger, more blotchy. You could have some being a little smaller. And I feel like you almost have to do the dots and then step away. And then when you look at it, it just looks so much better. And I do put them between the two, but I don't necessarily put them between, like I put them going here, but I don't put them in between each of those, but it's up to you. I don't like mine to all look exactly the same, so I like to vary the sizes and the shapes and the direction that my brush goes, just so it's get some little tiny ones in there too. And then once you have all your little dots done, if you wanted to put any white on top of your, now it might still be kind of wet, but I did put a couple little white dots on top of my cone flour, just at the top parts. Because up here is where we did it first. So all I'm gonna do is just some tiny little highlight dots up there. Just kind of like that. I don't know. Almost didn't even need it, but just wanted to add that in there. And then because I am still recording this, I'm just going to say that the last thing would be to sign it, and then you are complete. So I going to speak to only those people right now who are watching the recording. So thank you so much for following along with this tutorial. If you have any questions, please let me know. And I would love to see a photo of your finished piece when you are all done with it. I hope you had a good time, and thank you so much for watching. All right, I'm going to stop the recording. I can't remember how to do that.